the scratch-off ticket cost $5. I bought it on a whim at the gas station near our apartment. The same gas station where I'd been stopping for years. The one with the flickering fluorescent light and the clerk who always called me sweetheart in a way that was more tired than flirtatious. It was a Tuesday. Unremarkable. Overcast. I'd stopped for milk and bread, the kind of mundane errand that made up the architecture of my life with Darren. We'd been married for 8 years, and somewhere along the way, the passion had curdled into routine. Not hatred, not even resentment, just a quiet acceptance that this was what marriage became after the initial fire died. I'd convinced myself that love was about endurance, about staying when staying was hard. I scratched the ticket in my car, parked in the lot, the engine still running. The first few symbols meant nothing. Then the third row revealed 3 matching numbers. Then the fourth. Then the fifth. I stared at the ticket for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. My hands were shaking. $1 million. The jackpot was $1 million. $1 million that could change everything. $1 million that could buy me freedom. The kind of freedom I'd been dreaming about for years, the kind that would let me leave the life I'd been slowly suffocating in. I didn't tell Darren that night. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe. Or the slow realization that the man I'd married wasn't the man I'd thought he was. The signs had been there for years. The small lies, the hidden credit card bills, the way he'd started looking at me like I was furniture instead of a person. The way he'd come home late without explanation, the way his phone had become a fortress, the way he'd stopped asking about my day and started treating my presence as a given rather than a gift. But I'd ignored them. I'd convinced myself that I was being paranoid, that every marriage went through rough patches, that Darren was just stressed from work. He worked in sales, a high-pressure job that required constant travel and endless networking. I told myself his distance was exhaustion, not indifference. I told myself his coldness was temporary, not permanent. That night, I hid the ticket in the back of my jewelry box, beneath the fake pearls my mother had given me on my wedding day. The pearls were the only thing of value I'd brought into the marriage, and even those were cheap imitations, a symbol of a love that had never quite materialized. I told myself I was just being cautious. I told myself I'd tell him in the morning. I never got the chance. The next evening, I came home from work to find the apartment ransacked. Drawers were pulled out, their contents scattered across the floor. The couch cushions were overturned. The jewelry box was empty, its contents dumped onto the bed. And Darren was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in his hand, looking like a man who'd just won the lottery. Which I realized with dawning horror, he had. "It was in your jewelry box," he said, his voice calm, almost bored. "You should have told me, Amanda. We're supposed to be a team." "What are you talking about?" He held up the ticket. My ticket? The one I'd scratched in the gas station parking lot, the one I'd hidden like a secret, the one that was supposed to be my escape, the one that represented everything I'd been too afraid to hope for. "Don't play dumb," he said. "I found it. I know what it's worth." "You went through my things? Your things?" He laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "There's no your things anymore. We're married. What's yours is mine. Remember? In sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for richer or poorer," I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "Is that what this is about? Money? This is about us. About our future. About what we deserve." He stood up, pocketing the ticket. I'm going to cash this in tomorrow. And then we're going to start over. A new house, a new car, a new life. A new life, I said slowly. With you. Of course with me. Who else would it be with? I looked at him then, really looked. The man I'd married. The man I'd loved. The man who'd just stolen $1 million from me without a second thought. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The love I'd been clinging to for years, the hope I'd been nursing, the belief that Darren was just going through a rough patch. It all evaporated. It was like a fog lifting, revealing a landscape I'd been too afraid to see. Of course, I said, my voice steady. With you. He smiled, satisfied, and walked out of the room. He didn't see me smile back. He didn't see the calm that had settled over me like a shroud. He didn't know that I'd spent the night before planning our future. He didn't know that I'd taken precautions. The ticket he'd found wasn't the winning ticket. It was a decoy. An identical scratch-off I'd bought the same day, the same gas station, the same tired clerk. I'd scratched it off that morning, carefully, deliberately, and matched the numbers to the winning ticket. Then I'd locked the real ticket in my safety deposit box at the bank, the one Darren didn't know about, the one I'd opened in secret 6 months earlier. 6 months. That was how long I'd been planning my escape. Not consciously, not with any real intention, but somewhere in the back of my mind I'd known that Darren's love was conditional, that his affection was transactional, that if I ever stopped being useful to him, he'd discard me without a second thought. The safety deposit box had been my insurance policy, a small act of rebellion I'd never thought I'd need. The ticket he had in his pocket was worth exactly $5. I let him believe he'd won. I let him strut around the apartment, making plans, talking about the house we'd buy in the suburbs, the car he'd always wanted, the vacation to Europe we'd never been able to afford. I let him spend the night dreaming of a future that would never happen. He talked for hours. The kitchen table became his stage, and I was his captive audience. He described the mansion he'd buy, the pool he'd install, the sports car he'd drive. He talked about quitting his job, about telling his boss exactly what he thought of him, about finally getting the respect he deserved. He didn't mention me once. Not in any meaningful way. I was just the backdrop, the wife who'd be expected to decorate the new house and host the dinner parties and smile for the photographs. And in the morning, I let him walk out the door. He didn't say goodbye. He was too excited, too focused on his new life. He kissed me on the forehead like I was a child, like I was an afterthought, and he walked out of our apartment with the fake ticket in his pocket and a smile on his face. I watched him from the window, watched him get into his car, watched him drive away toward the lottery office. I gave him 3 hours. Then I called my lawyer. The confrontation happened at the lottery office. Darren had arrived early, eager to claim his prize. The security guard had let him into the lobby, taken his information, and disappeared into the back. Darren sat in the waiting area, rehearsing the speech he'd give to the reporters, imagining the look on his friends' faces when they learned he was a millionaire. He'd already called his mother, his brother, his best friend from college. He'd already started spending the money in his head. Then the security guard returned with 2 police officers. "I'm sorry, sir," the guard said, "but there seems to be a problem with your ticket." "What problem? This ticket isn't a winner." "What? It's not a winning ticket. It's worth $5. Darren's face went pale. "That's impossible." I checked the numbers. I matched them. It's the jackpot. I'm sorry, sir. This ticket is not the winning ticket. The winning ticket was claimed this morning by your wife. I arrived at the office just as they were escorting Darren out. He looked wild, his eyes darting around the lobby, searching for an escape that didn't exist. When he saw me, his face contorted with rage. The color drained from his cheeks, replaced by a sickly shade of white. His hands were shaking, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles twitching in his neck. You, he spat. You did this. I did do this, I said calmly. I bought the ticket. I scratched it. I won. And then you stole it. You're lying. You're a liar. That was my ticket. It was our ticket. Was it? I pulled the real ticket out of my purse, the one with the winning numbers, the one I'd claimed that morning. Because this is the winning ticket. And it has my name on it. I'll sue you. I'll take you for everything you have. Good luck with that. I smiled, the same calm smile I'd worn the night before. I've already filed for divorce. And I've already provided the court with evidence of your theft. The security cameras at the gas station, the timestamp on the ticket, the fact that you went through my belongings without my consent. It's all very clear. You can't do this. We're married. What's yours is mine. That's not how it works, Darren. That's not how any of this works. The police officers stepped forward, one of them taking Darren by the arm. Sir, we're going to need you to come with us. On what charges? Theft. Attempted fraud. Possibly more, depending on what the investigation turns up. Darren looked at me, his eyes filled with a hatred I'd never seen before. You'll regret this. I'll make sure you regret this. Maybe I will, I said. But I'll regret it with $1 million in the bank. They took him away. I watched him go, watched the doors close behind him, and I felt nothing. No sadness. No guilt. No relief. Just the quiet satisfaction of a plan executed perfectly. The same satisfaction I'd felt years ago when I finished a difficult puzzle or solved a complex equation. It was clean. It was complete. It was justice. The divorce was swift. Darren tried to fight it, but the evidence was overwhelming. The security footage from the gas station, the timestamp on the ticket, the fact that he'd gone through my belongings without my permission. The judge granted me full ownership of the winnings and a restraining order against Darren. He was convicted of theft and attempted fraud. He served 18 months in a minimum security prison. When he got out, he tried to contact me, but I'd already moved. New city, new apartment, new life. I'd changed my phone number, my email, everything. I didn't want to hear from him. I didn't want to see his face or hear his excuses or listen to him try to explain why stealing from his wife was somehow justified. I gave myself time to heal. I didn't rush into anything. I didn't make any big decisions. I just let myself be, let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. The betrayal, the anger, the grief. I'd lost more than a husband. I'd lost 8 years of my life, 8 years I'd spent pouring love into someone who'd never deserved it. The money changed everything. I bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of house I'd always dreamed of. It had a garden in the back, a garden I'd always wanted but never had the time or money to maintain. I planted roses and lavender and a small vegetable patch. I learned to cook meals that didn't come from a box. I started running in the mornings, something I'd always wanted to do but had been too self-conscious to try. I started a small business, a bookstore, something I'd wanted to do since I was a child. I found a charming space in a historic district with exposed brick walls and creaky wooden floors. I filled it with books I loved, books I'd read and cherished, and wanted to share with the world. I hired 2 wonderful employees, both of them passionate readers who treated the store like their own. I traveled. I went to Paris, to Rome, to Barcelona. I sat in cafes and watched people walk by. I visited museums and galleries and cathedrals. I took photographs of everything and nothing. I learned that the world was bigger than I'd ever imagined, that there were places I'd never seen and people I'd never met and experiences I'd never had. I read. I devoured books the way I'd devoured food as a child, hungrily, gratefully, desperately. I read fiction and nonfiction, poetry and prose, memoirs and mysteries. I found solace in the words of others, in the stories of people who'd survived worse and thrived anyway. I started writing myself, journaling my thoughts and feelings and dreams. And slowly I started to heal. It wasn't easy. There were nights I woke up in a cold sweat, convinced Darren had found me, and convinced he was standing over my bed with the same cold smile he'd worn when he took the ticket. There were days I couldn't bring myself to leave the house. Certain I'd see him on the street, certain he'd find a way to hurt me again. But I got through it. Therapy helped. So did the friends I made, people who didn't know my past, who only knew the woman I was becoming. I started to trust again. I started to believe that I deserved good things, that I wasn't defined by the man who'd tried to destroy me. I started to see myself as someone worthy of love and respect and happiness. A year after the divorce, I met someone new. His name was David. He was an English professor at the local college, kind and patient and utterly unassuming. He had kind eyes and a gentle smile and a way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He didn't know about the money. He didn't know about Darren. He just knew me, the woman who ran a bookstore and loved poetry and talked too much about her cat. It took me months to tell him the truth. I was terrified. I'd been so hurt, so betrayed, that I couldn't imagine trusting anyone again. Every time I felt myself getting close to him, I pulled away. Every time he showed me kindness, I braced myself for the inevitable betrayal. I'd learned that love was dangerous, that opening your heart meant opening yourself to pain. But David was different. He was patient. He never pushed. He let me come to him in my own time, in my own way. When I finally told him everything, the ticket, the theft, the divorce, the years of healing, he listened without judgment. He held my hand while I cried. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer solutions. He just let me speak. And when I finished, he said the words I never expected to hear. I'm sorry he did that to you. But I'm glad you got away. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're mine. We're married now. It's been 3 years. The bookstore is thriving. David still teaches, but he spends his weekends helping me with inventory and making coffee for the customers. We have a cat named Gatsby and a garden that's finally starting to grow. It's not a perfect life. But it's mine. It's ours. And that's enough. I still think about Darren sometimes, not with longing or regret, but with a kind of distant curiosity. I wonder if he ever learned his lesson. I wonder if he ever understood what he'd lost. I wonder if he's happy, or if he's still the same angry, entitled man who thought he could take whatever he wanted without consequence. Sometimes I check the news. He's been arrested a few more times. Small things, petty theft, fraud, the kind of crimes that come from a life built on lies. I feel sad for him sometimes. Not for the man he became, but for the man he might have been. The man I thought I married. The man who used to bring me coffee in bed and make me laugh with his terrible jokes. The man who'd once held my hand and promised to love me forever. But I don't feel guilty. I don't feel responsible. He made his choices. He chose to steal from me. He chose to lie and cheat and manipulate. And he chose to face the consequences. I didn't make him into the person he became. I just stopped pretending he was someone else. I chose to survive. I chose to thrive. I chose to build a life that didn't depend on him. I chose to become the person I always wanted to be, the person I'd been too afraid to become while I was with him. People often ask me if I regret buying that ticket. If I could go back, would I do it all over again? The answer is yes. I would. Not because of the money, though that certainly helped. But because that ticket gave me a choice. It gave me the power to walk away. It gave me the courage to become the person I always wanted to be. It gave me the freedom to live my life on my own terms. The theft was the worst thing Darren ever did to me. But it was also the best thing that ever happened to me. Because it showed me who he really was. And it showed me who I really was. Someone who could survive. Someone who could thrive. Someone who could forgive without forgetting. I don't hate Darren anymore. That's the thing about healing. It doesn't require forgetting. It doesn't even require forgiving. It just requires letting go. And I did. I let go of the anger and the resentment and the fear. I let go of the woman I was, the woman who stayed too long and hoped too much. I let go of the past and embraced the future, and I became someone new. The ticket is framed now, hanging on the wall of my bookstore. Customers often ask about it, and I tell them the story. Not the whole story, just the part about buying it on a whim and winning $1 million. I don't tell them about Darren. I don't tell them about the theft or the divorce or the years of healing. Those are mine. They're part of me, but they're not the whole story. The whole story is this. Sometimes the worst things in your life lead to the best things. Sometimes the person who hurts you the most is the one who sets you free. Sometimes the gift you didn't want becomes the gift you needed most. Sometimes the only way to find yourself is to lose everything you thought you wanted. I think about that a lot. About how we're shaped by the people who betray us. About how we can either let them destroy us or use them to become stronger. About how forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about letting yourself off the hook. It's about releasing the burden of anger and resentment and choosing to move forward. I forgave Darren eventually. Not because he deserved it. He didn't. But because I needed to. Because carrying that anger was like carrying a weight that was slowly crushing me. Letting it go was the only way I could truly move on. It was the only way I could be free. I still don't know if he's sorry. I don't know if he's capable of being sorry. But it doesn't matter anymore. His guilt or innocence, his remorse or lack thereof, it's not my problem. It's his. I've let go of the need to see him suffer or apologize or change. I've let go of the need for closure or justice or revenge. I've let go of the need for him to be anything other than what he is. My problem is living my life, building my business, loving my husband, growing my garden, reading my books, being present in the moments that matter. My problem is being happy, being grateful, being free. The money is nice. It gave me security and freedom and the ability to take risks I wouldn't have taken otherwise. But it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is the life I've built around it. The people I love, the work I do, the person I've become, the peace I've found. I used to think the lottery ticket was the beginning of something, a new life, a new start. But I was wrong. The lottery ticket wasn't the beginning. It was the middle. The real beginning happened years earlier, the moment I bought that ticket and decided to keep it a secret. That was the moment I started fighting for myself. That was the moment I became the person I needed to be. That was the moment I stopped being a victim and started being a survivor. The ending is still being written. Every day I add another page. Every day I choose to be happy, to be grateful, to be free. Every day I choose to live my life on my own terms. And I'm free. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? How did you find the strength to move on? Share your perspective in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about resilience, justice, and the complicated nature of love, please consider subscribing and joining us for the next journey.